It has a history of simple burglary charges dating back to the 1990s.
3 years before he pulled the trigger, Shamar Elkins looked the woman who raised him in the eye and told her exactly what he was going to do. He said if his wife ever tried to leave and take his children, he would kill her, kill the kids, and kill himself. She asked him if he meant it. He smiled and said he was just playing. She believed him. She should not have believed him. This is not the story of a man who snapped on April 19th, 2026. This is the story of a man who made a decision years before that morning and spent the time in between waiting for the moment that decision would become necessary. Stay with me, because everything you think you know about this case is only part of the story. Welcome to the Case Desk. This channel covers the cases that don't end with the headline. We go deeper, every time. If you're new here, subscribe now and turn on notifications. You will not want to miss what is coming. Today we are in Shreveport, Louisiana. 8 children. 1 man. 1 court date he never showed up to. Let's get into it. She had just turned 3 years old the month before. She was small for her age. She never woke up on Sunday morning. And she wasn't the only one. At 5:55 in the morning on April 19th, 2026, a 911 dispatcher in Shreveport, Louisiana, picked up a call. A woman on the line said she was on the roof of a house, said there was a man inside, said he had just shot someone. What police were about to walk into on the 300 block of West 79th Street, their own chief would describe as one of the worst mornings in the history of the city. 8 children, all gone before sunrise. And the man responsible had a court date the very next morning. This is what happened in Cedar Grove, Shreveport, Louisiana. And before this is over, you are going to understand exactly how a father who posted smiling photos of his children on Easter Sunday became the man who ended their lives just 14 days later. Before Shamar Elkins was a name flashing across breaking news, he was a child in Shreveport, a child who had already been failed by the people who were supposed to protect him. His mother, Mahalia Elkins, gave birth to him when she was a teenager. She was battling a crack cocaine addiction. She could not raise him, so she didn't. She left him. A woman in the community named Betty Walker stepped in. She was not his biological mother. She was just a woman who saw a child who needed a home, and she gave him one. Betty Walker was there for his childhood, his teenage years, his early adult life. She sat across from him at her dinner table more times than she could count. She knew him better than almost anyone. Mahalia, his biological mother, only reconnected with her son about a decade ago. By then, Shamar was already grown, already a father, already carrying things nobody had helped him put down. He joined the Louisiana Army National Guard in August 2013, served for 7 years. His roles were Signal Support Systems Specialist and Fire Support Specialist. He was never deployed overseas, never saw combat. He left in August 2020 as a private, the lowest rank in the military. He came back to Shreveport, got a job at UPS. To the people who worked with him, Shamar Elkins looked like a regular man, a devoted father who talked about his kids constantly, a coworker, someone you waved at in the parking lot, but a man named Willie Vasher, who worked alongside him at UPS, noticed something. Elkins always seemed stressed, and he had this habit. He would pull at his hair throughout the day, compulsively. He had done it for so long that there was a visible bald spot on his head. Vasher thought it was just stress. Most people did. Nobody connected that bald spot to what was building underneath it. By his early 30s, Shamar Elkins had 7 children across different relationships. 3 boys, 5 girls. He had been with a woman named Shaniqua Pugh for 10 years. In April 2024, they made it official. They got married. She was 34, he was 29. On the surface, it looked like the life he had always been reaching toward. Children, a home, a family photo for Easter Sunday. But underneath it, the cracks had been there since 2015. In 2015, Shamar Elkins was convicted of his first offense, driving while intoxicated and failure to yield to emergency vehicles. It was a misdemeanor. He served probation. The system noted it and moved on. 4 years later, March 2019, Elkins got into a dispute. He was outside meeting a friend when someone in a car pulled a gun on him. Elkins reached into his waistband, pulled out a 9mm handgun, and fired 5 rounds at the vehicle as it drove away. He fired those 5 rounds less than 300 feet from the fence line of Caddo Magnet High School. Children were playing outside on the schoolyard when the shots went off. One bullet was recovered near school property. He was arrested, charged with 2 offenses: illegal use of weapons and carrying a firearm on school property. In October 2019, Shamar Elkins pleaded guilty to the illegal use of weapons charge. The second charge, carrying a firearm on school property, was dismissed entirely. His sentence? 1 year of hard labor. But the judge suspended that sentence and replaced it with 18 months of probation. He was ordered to pay $300 in court costs, $60 a month to the probation department, and complete community service. He completed his probation. He walked. And here is the legal detail that investigators and gun control advocates pointed to immediately after April 19, 2026. Because his 2019 conviction resulted in probation, rather than a prison-eligible felony sentence, it fell below the legal threshold that would have permanently banned him from owning firearms under Louisiana law. Under Louisiana's gun possession statute, only specific felonies trigger a firearms ban. His conviction did not qualify. He kept his access to weapons. For the next 7 years, nobody revisited him. No follow-up, no check-in, no mandatory mental health evaluation. The system processed him and filed him away. That legal loophole, the gap between what he did and what the law required to take his guns, is now the center of active reform discussions in Louisiana. The Giffords Law Center, founded by former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, identified the shooting as a direct consequence of exactly that gap. A man fired shots near a school full of children and walked away with his weapons intact. For 7 years, nobody went back. Now here's the detail that did not come from police. It did not appear in the initial breaking news coverage. It came from Betty Walker in her conversation with the New York Times, days after the shooting. 3 years before April 19, 2026, Shaniqua first raised the possibility of leaving him. She mentioned taking the children with her. Shamar Elkins' reaction was immediate, and it was extreme. He went to Betty Walker, the woman who had raised him from childhood, and he told her directly, if his wife tried to leave and take his kids, he would kill her, kill the children, and kill himself. Betty Walker was alarmed enough to confront him about it. He walked it back. He told her he was just playing. He smiled. He moved on. Walker later told the New York Times, I never thought, and nobody ever told me, that he would go through with killing himself and killing these kids. But here is what that moment tells us now. Looking back from the other side of April 19th, 3 years before the shooting, Shamar Elkins had already connected his entire identity to being a father, to having his children present in his life, under his control, on his terms. And the idea of losing that produced a homicidal response. He had already told someone what he would do. That person believed he was joking. That is where the motive begins. Not on April 19th, not at Easter, not at the divorce filing. 3 years before any of that. In a conversation everyone moved past and nobody acted on. Shamar and Shaniqua had been together for 10 years. They married in April 2024. On paper, it looked like a commitment. In reality, according to family members, the relationship had been under strain for years before the wedding. Betty Walker confirmed to the New York Times that both Elkins and his wife had accused each other of infidelity at different points. There were financial pressures on top of that. A house full of children from multiple relationships. The weight of a blended family that required constant management and constant money. By early 2026, Shaniqua made her decision. She filed for divorce. The reason, according to Troy Brown, Elkins' brother-in-law, who lived in the house and whose own son was among the children killed, was infidelity. Elkins had been unfaithful. She had found out. She was done. A court date was scheduled for Monday, April 20th, 2026, the morning after. The filing was not a surprise to Elkins. He knew it was coming. But knowing something is coming and having it officially arrive are two very different things. When those divorce papers were real, when there was a court date on the calendar, when the legal process had been set into motion, something changed in him. Troy Brown watched it happen up close. He was not a distant observer. He lived in that house. He watched Elkins every single day. After the first argument about the divorce, Brown told the Washington Post that Elkins acted like he was losing his mind. He described Elkins as someone who felt like everything was falling apart simultaneously. The marriage ending, the custody of his children uncertain. His life, as he knew it, closing in on him. Brown did everything a concerned brother-in-law could do. He sat with him, he took walks with him, he played dominoes with him, he kept talking, he kept showing up. When Elkins got low enough that even those conversations weren't enough, Brown pushed him toward professional help. Elkins listened. In January 2026, Shamar Elkins voluntarily checked himself into the Overton Brooks VA Medical Center in Shreveport for a mental health evaluation. He stayed for about a week and a half. When he came home, Troy Brown said he seemed like a different person, calmer, talking about the future, talking about being a good father, doing things right, getting his life back in order. He told Brown he didn't need to go back. He said he was okay. He was not okay. And then came the detail that changed everything. In February 2026, 2 months before the shooting, Shamar Elkins attempted to take his own life. Betty Walker did not detail what happened. She said only that he had tried, and that she declined to discuss the specifics. What happened after the attempt is documented. Elkins began taking medication. He voluntarily checked himself into the VA Medical Center for psychiatric treatment. He came home, he seemed better, and nobody connected his February suicide attempt to the firearms he still had access to. Nobody called the ATF. Nobody went back to the 2019 conviction and asked whether his mental health history now created additional legal grounds for removing his weapons. He came home from the VA, told everyone he was fine, and spent the next 2 months getting to April 19th. On Easter Sunday, April 5th, 2026. 14 days before the shooting, Shamar dressed his children up for church. He posted a photo on Facebook with the caption, "Happy Easter. Had a wonderful time at church for the first time with all my kids. What a blessed day." That was the public face. The private conversation that followed was something else entirely. He called his mother, Mahalia, and his stepfather, Marcus Jackson. He told them his wife wanted a divorce. He told them he was drowning in dark thoughts. He said he wanted to end his life. His stepfather did what any parent would do. He encouraged him. He told him he could get through it. He said, "You can beat this stuff, man. I don't care what you're going through. You can beat it." And Shamar Elkins responded with the last words his stepfather would ever hear from him on that subject. Some people don't come back from their demons. Jackson said he felt uneasy after that call. But days passed. On April 9th, Elkins posted a prayer on Facebook. "Dear God, today I ask you to help me guard my mind and my emotions." His mother texted him on April 14th, 5 days before the shooting, to ask how everyone was doing. He replied that everyone was okay. On Saturday, April 18th, the day before, he took his eldest daughter out to eat. He posted the photo, father-daughter date, a burger spot. He was smiling. She was smiling. That night, Troy Brown left the house for his overnight work shift at 9 o'clock. When he left, Elkins was calm. No arguments, no raised voices. The children were in the living room playing games and watching television. Everything felt completely normal. Troy Brown would later say, "All I know is he just snapped." But based on everything now on record, the threat 3 years earlier, the February suicide attempt, the Easter Sunday call, the demon's comment, the court date for the following morning, this was not a snap. This was an arrival. April 20th, 2026 was the court date. Elkins and Shaniqua were scheduled to appear that morning to proceed with the formal separation. The legal mechanism that would settle custody, divide what little there was to divide, and establish on paper what the relationship had already become in reality. For most people, a court date is hard and painful, but it is survivable. People go through divorce, people share custody of children, life continues. For Shamar Elkins, that court date was not the beginning of a new chapter. It was the end of everything he had defined himself by. His entire identity, the father, the provider, the man in those Easter photos, was built around his children being present in his life, on his terms. He had told Betty Walker 3 years earlier that if anyone tried to take that from him, he would not survive it, and neither would they. The court date was the proof that someone was trying to take it. He had already attempted suicide in February. He had already told his stepfather he might not come back from his demons. He had already spent weeks praying publicly about guarding his mind. And on the morning of April 19th, the day before that court date, he made the decision that had been living inside him for years. He was not going to the courthouse. He was going to West 79th Street. Before we go any further, we need to stop, because this is where stories like this get reduced to a number: 8 children. But these were not numbers. They were lives, and they deserve to be named properly. Jayla Elkins, 3 years old. She had just turned 3 the month before. She was small for her age. Relatives said she was Shamar's youngest daughter. She never woke up that Sunday morning. Shayla Elkins, 5 years old. Jayla's older sister, Brylan Snow, 5 years old. One of Christine Snow's sons, Kayla Pugh, 6 years old, one of Shaniqua's daughters. Kadarian Snow, 6 years old, another of Christine's children. Layla Pugh, 7 years old, Shaniqua's daughter. Markaden Pugh, 10 years old. He was Troy Brown's son, the same Troy Brown who lived in that Heights, who spent weeks trying to hold Shamar Elkins together. On Monday, April 20th, Troy Brown stood before journalists to identify his son. Through tears, he said, "I'm never going to get to throw the football with him again." Saria Snow, 11 years old, the oldest of the 8, Christine Snow's daughter. 3 boys, 5 girls, ages 3 to 11. 7 of them were Shamar's own children. The 8th was his nephew. Their deaths marked the 8th through the 15th homicides in Shreveport for the entire year of 2026, in one morning, by one man. Now here is what happened, minute by minute. At approximately 5 o'clock in the morning on April 19th, Shamar Elkins went to a residence on Harrison Street. His girlfriend was there. He shot her multiple times. She survived, but her injuries were described as life-threatening. He fled that address and drove less than a quarter mile to his next target, the 300 block of West 79th Street in Cedar Grove. That house was where Shaniqua Pugh lived, where Troy Brown's family lived, where Christine Snow's children were staying that night. 9 people were inside that house. 8 of them were children. Elkins entered the home. He shot a second woman inside, and then he moved through the rooms. Most of the children were still asleep. Shreveport police confirmed that most of the children were shot in the head. They described it as execution style. Some of the children woke up. Some of them tried to run. State Representative Tammy Phelps confirmed that some attempted to escape through the back door. The bullet holes in that back door were still visible when journalists arrived Monday morning. They are part of the forensic record of what happened inside that house. A neighbor 2 houses down, Liza Deming, told reporters her security camera captured Elkins running away from the house and picked up the sound of 2 gunshots. Inside the house, Keosha Pugh, Shaniqua's sister, who was living there at the time, grabbed her 12-year-old daughter. They got out through a roof window above the garage, made it into the backyard. She called 911, 5:55 a.m. The first call reaches the Shreveport dispatcher. The caller says she is on top of the house, says there is a man inside, says someone has been shot. 5:58 a.m. She calls back, says the suspect is a relative. 5:59 a.m. She tells dispatch that 9 people live in that house, and the suspect shot everyone inside. 6 a.m. She confirms she and her daughter escaped through the roof. They are in the backyard. 6:01 a.m. Officers arrive at West 79th Street. 6:03 a.m. Officers make contact with the caller. 6:07 a.m. A second 911 call comes in from Harrison Street. Elkins' girlfriend reports she has been shot, says Elkins fled the scene and took her 3 children with him. 6:08 a.m. She identifies the suspect, Shamar Elkins. 6:10 a.m. Dispatch links both shootings, confirms they are connected. 6:15 a.m. Officers receive word that Elkins has carjacked a red Kia Sportage near the intersection of Linwood Avenue and West 79th Street. 6:17 a.m. Traffic units on patrol spot the Kia heading southbound on Interstate 49. 6:18 a.m. Officers radio they are pursuing the vehicle over a bridge crossing the Red River into Bossier City. 6:20 a.m. Officers report the children taken from Harrison Street may be inside the fleeing vehicle. 6:23 a.m., officers report exiting the interstate near the Swan Lake area of Bossier City. 6:25 a.m., officers back in Shreveport locate the injured woman at Harrison Street. 6:29 a.m., gunfire is exchanged between Elkins and officers on Brompton Lane in Bossier City. He is armed with a rifle-style assault pistol, a heavier weapon than the one used inside the home. 6:40 a.m., officers confirm the carjacked vehicle is empty. No children are found inside. Shamar Elkins is pronounced dead at the scene. Whether he died from police gunfire or by his own hand remains under investigation by Louisiana State Police. No officers were harmed. The entire sequence, from the first shot fired at Harrison Street to Elkins's death on Brompton Lane, lasted 68 minutes. 8 children were dead. 2 women were in surgery. 1 adult woman and a 12-year-old girl had broken bones from jumping off a roof. And a city of 180,000 people was waking up to news it didn't know how to process. Investigators identified 5 separate crime scenes: the Harrison Street address, the West 79th Street home, the carjacking site near Linwood Avenue, the pursuit route on Interstate 49, and the final confrontation on Brompton Lane in Bossier City. Forensic teams worked the West 79th Street house through the day. Evidence markers were placed at the back door where bullet holes confirmed children had tried to run. Shell casings were logged and mapped. The neighbor's security camera footage was secured as evidence. From the moment investigators identified the assault-style pistol Elkins used, a central question drove the investigation. How did he get it? He had a 2019 weapons conviction on his record. Police spokesman Christopher Bordelon stated publicly that Elkins was likely prohibited from legally possessing firearms because of that conviction. So where did the rifle-style pistol come from? The ATF ran a firearms trace on the weapon within days of the shooting. On April 21, 2026, 2 days after the shooting, the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Louisiana announced the arrest of Charles Ford, 56 years old, a Shreveport resident. Ford was charged federally with 2 counts: felon in possession of a firearm and making false statements to federal agents. According to the ATF affidavit, investigators traced the Mossberg pistol used in the shooting back through its chain of ownership. A woman told federal agents she had given the gun to Ford while she was hospitalized the previous year. Ford, himself a convicted felon legally prohibited from owning firearms, initially denied to ATF agents that he had ever possessed the weapon. He later admitted he did have it and stated he believed Elkins had taken it. Whether Ford knowingly provided the weapon to Elkins or whether Elkins obtained it without Ford's direct knowledge is part of what the federal case will determine. Ford faces up to 15 years in federal prison on the possession charge and up to 5 years on the false statement charge. U.S. Attorney Zachary Keller issued a statement that addressed the community directly. He said Elkins's death means the community will never see him face justice, but that holding the person whose gun Elkins used accountable would give some small measure of solace to Shreveport. ATF Special Agent in Charge, Joshua Jackson, added, "Holding people accountable does not stop with the person who pulled the trigger, but also includes those who give access to and proliferate firearms that are later used in violent crime. The gun that killed 8 children in Cedar Grove did not appear from nowhere. It passed through hands, it moved through a chain, and each person in that chain who knew they were not supposed to have it is now part of the legal accounting for what happened on April 19th. Police Chief Wayne Smith described the motive publicly as stemming from a domestic dispute. That is accurate as far as it goes. But what investigators are now building is a picture of something far more specific. Former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe told CNN that investigators would formally assess whether this case fits the classification of family annihilation. Family annihilation is a recognized pattern in domestic homicide research. It describes a perpetrator, almost always male, almost always a father, who responds to a perceived catastrophic loss of control over his family by killing its members, rather than allowing the separation to proceed. The act is not random. It is not impulsive in the way a bar fight is impulsive. It is premeditated. The perpetrator has decided at some point before the act that this is the outcome he is willing to accept. The profile fits Shamar Elkins exactly. He expressed the core logic of family annihilation to Betty Walker 3 years before the shooting. If they leave, I kill them and myself. That is the sentence. That is the entire motive, compressed into one statement. What followed over the next 3 years was a slow accumulation of pressures. The accusations of infidelity, the financial strain, the divorce filing, the February suicide attempt, the VA hospitalization, the Easter Sunday confession, each one confirming to him that the separation he had threatened to respond to with violence was actually happening. The court date on April 20th was the final confirmation. He had already answered it. Shreveport City Council member Tabitha Taylor broke down at a press conference and said, "This is not a freaking joke. This is real. And this is the result when someone snaps." But this was not a snap. The Shreveport shooting of April 19th, 2026, is the deadliest mass shooting in the United States since January 2024, when 8 people were killed in Joliet, Illinois. In that case as well, nearly all the victims were family members of the shooter. In Shreveport, the 8 deaths more than doubled the city's homicide count for the entire year in a single morning. Over 30% of all homicides in Shreveport are domestic in nature. That statistic was true before April 19th. It is still true now. Shamar Elkins had given the people around him multiple signals in the weeks before the shooting. He confessed suicidal thoughts to his mother and stepfather on Easter Sunday. He posted a prayer asking God to guard his mind 10 days before the shooting. He sought treatment at the VA months earlier. He attempted suicide 2 months before the attack. His brother-in-law watched him deteriorate in real time and tried to keep him stable. None of those signals were connected to each other in a way that produced intervention. Nobody flagged him. Nobody monitored him. Nobody went back. The legal loophole that allowed him to keep his guns after a weapons conviction, because the sentence fell below the felony threshold for a permanent firearms ban under Louisiana law, is now a specific focus of reform discussions in the state. The Giffords Law Center called it a direct consequence of gaps in firearms restriction law. None of this brings back Jayla, Shayla, Brylan, Kayla, Kadarian, Layla, Markaden, or Soraya. But all of it tells us something that matters. Here is what the full picture of this case now shows. Shamar Elkins told someone what he was going to do 3 years before he did it. He attempted suicide 2 months before the shooting. He confessed his state of mind to his family on Easter Sunday and used the word demons. He received treatment at the VA and was discharged back into the same crisis without any mechanism to review his access to firearms. He obtained a weapon illegally through a chain that is now the subject of federal prosecution. He carried out on April 19th exactly what he had described 3 years earlier, and he did it the night before the court date that would have legally separated him from his children. None of that makes what he did explainable in any satisfying sense, but all of it makes it preventable in retrospect. The threat was spoken, the attempt happened, the warning signs were posted publicly, the system processed him in 2019 and let him walk. The VA treated him in February and sent him home. The people around him heard the demons comment and kept going. Every single one of those moments was a door, and every single one of those doors stayed closed. 8 children paid for every closed door. This did not happen overnight. It built over years, through a childhood without a mother, through a weapons conviction that carried no real consequence, through a marriage that was ending, through a man who checked himself into a hospital, came home, and told everyone he was fine, through a Saturday night when his brother-in-law left for work at 9 o'clock, and everything looked calm, and through a court date the following morning that Shamar Elkins had already decided he was never going to attend. Shaniqua Pugh survived. She is asking about her children from a hospital bed in Shreveport. Her family is trying to find the right words. There are no right words. Christine Snow's 3 children are gone. Troy Brown will never throw a football with his son again. Betty Walker, the woman who raised Shamar Elkins from childhood, made herself a cup of coffee on Sunday morning and got the call that her babies were gone. And somewhere in Shreveport, a neighbor will never throw a football with his son again. Betty Walker, The woman who raised Shamar Elkins from childhood made herself a cup of coffee on Sunday morning and got the call that her babies were gone. And somewhere in Shreveport, a neighbor named Fred Montgomery is still thinking about Saturday evening, the evening before. When he looked across the street, saw Shamar sitting on his porch and waved at him. Shamar waved back. The children were in the yard. Everything looked fine. If you are watching this and something in this story feels familiar, if someone in your life has said something that scared you, even once, even if they walked it back and said they were just playing, please do not move past it the way everyone around Shamar Elkins did. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available around the clock. If this story mattered to you, share it. Someone in your circle may need to hear it. Subscribe to the Case Desk. Every case we cover is fully researched, factually accurate, and told with the people at the center of it in mind. We will see you in the next one.